Built in 1929, the stadium began as Denny Stadium, named after the school's president at that time, George H. Denny. President Denny served from 1912 until 1932 and played an integral part in the development of the football program from its earliest days. The first game ever played at Denny Stadium was a 55-0 beatdown of Mississippi College, now a Division II school. The school has never taken the name Denny off the stadium, but they did add a name in 1975 after legendary coach Bear Bryant while he was still coaching. That made him one of 8 head coaches to ever coach a game with their name on the building. He retired in 1982 as the winningest coach in college football history. He won 6 national championships and 13 SEC titles. Now, you should be used to seeing the name and face of Bear Bryant in Tuscaloosa. The stadium is located on Paul W. Bryant Drive, which is also the address for the Paul W. Bryant Museum. Student athletes live in Paul Bryant Hall, and just outside of Tuscaloosa is Paul W. Bryant High School. Now, the initial capacity in 1929 was 12,000, and nearly 100 years later, and 9 expansions, the stadium holds just over 100,000 fans at each game. Because of capacity issues, Alabama played as many as 4 of its home games in Legion Field, just an hour up the road in Birmingham. Legion Field has also hosted the Iron Bowl every year until 1989. In 1998, Bryant-Denny's capacity surpassed Legion's Field, so starting in 2000, the Iron Bowl was played in Tuscaloosa for the very first time. Today, Legion Field is used to host a number of different games, but it's home field for the UAB Blazers. One of the unique traditions that takes place inside the stadium is the playing of Dixieland Delight. In between the third and fourth quarters, the song written by the group Alabama is played, and after every line, you will hear the entire stadium chant, "Fudge Auburn," even when they're not playing them. They also add "Fudge LSU" and "Tennessee too," only they don't say fudge.
The big one, the queen mother of dirty words, the F dash 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 word.
Quigley Field is the home of the Central Arkansas High School football team, but it was the home field of the Arkansas Razorbacks until 1938, and that was when they built University Stadium. That name lasted a week, and they decided to change it to Bailey Field after the then governor of Arkansas, Carl Bailey. Bailey lost his re-election campaign, so they dropped his name from the stadium, and they just started calling it Razorback Stadium. The first game at Razorback Stadium was against Oklahoma A&M, now Oklahoma State. And who knows, by 2038, Oklahoma State might be in the SEC and they can have a rematch 100 years in the making. In 2001, they added the name Donald Reynolds to the building. Now, if you live in Arkansas or Oklahoma, that name should sound pretty familiar. It's on 27 buildings throughout the states. Donald Reynolds was a successful businessman and philanthropist, and he was a Missouri alum. Hold on. The name on the Arkansas Razorbacks stadium is a Missouri alum. Now, I don't know about you, but I see that as fuel to add to the fire of what I believe is the greatest name of a football rivalry in all of college football, Armogeddon. Arkansas split time like many schools, playing a few home games a year in the larger Veterans Memorial Stadium that started in 1948. Veterans Memorial Stadium is about 2 hours from Fayetteville, and it wouldn't be until 2022 the Razorbacks played every home game in Donald Reynolds Razorback Stadium. Now, the most familiar tradition inside Donald Reynolds Stadium is the calling of the Hogs. Now, the origin of this goes back to the 1920s, where a group of farmers were going to Razorback games and were squealing like pigs in order to rally the troops. It worked. Arkansas started playing better, and fans started to do it gradually more and more. Today, it's a full-on tradition. The school's official name at the time was the Alabama Polytechnic Institute. When when they built the football stadium in 1939, they named it Auburn Stadium. It's because it was in Auburn, Alabama, and that's how the school was referred. The first game played in Auburn Stadium was a 7-7 tie against the Florida Gators, and it held 15,000 fans. In 1947, the school decided to change the name to Cliff Hare Stadium. Hare was a member of the first football team. He was the mayor of the city of Auburn, and at one time he was the chairman of the Auburn Faculty Athletic Committee, what we would now call the athletic director. In 1973, the school added the name Jordan to the side of the building after legendary coach Ralph Shug Jordan. Jordan also became one of 8 coaches to ever coach a building with their name on the side of the building, and the first in the state of Alabama. At Auburn, Jordan won 176 games and a national championship in 1957. And like its neighbor to the north, Auburn also played several games a year at Legion Field due to capacity issues, despite the fact that it was a 2-hour drive for fans. And it was in 1987 that the capacity of the field surpassed Legion Field, and in 1989, they got to host the Iron Bowl for the very first time. If you go see a game in Jordan Hare Stadium, you will witness a tradition they call the Soaring of the Eagle. The War Eagle chant is a staple among Auburn fans. Now the most popular legend about the battle cry dates back to the first time Auburn met Georgia on the football field in 1892, and it centers on a spectator who was a Civil War veteran. The man found a golden eagle on the battlefield and took it home with him and kept it as a pet for 30 years. According to witnesses, the eagle suddenly broke free and began circling the stadium, and at that time, Auburn slowly started to march down the field for a game-winning touchdown. Auburn fans took that bird's present as an omen for success, and that's when the War Eagle was born. Built in 1914, the stadium that hosted games for the Mississippi A&M Aggies was named New Athletic Field because, well, it was the new athletic field. It's a little too on the nose, but 4 years later they changed it to Scott Field after Donald Scott. Scott was an alumni and former player who competed in the Summer Olympics in 1920. In 2001 they renamed it to Davis Wade Stadium and kept the field named Scott Field. Davis Wade was an individual who donated a large contribution to the stadium during its expansion of 2001. I didn't really find how much he donated, but it probably was pretty big if they put his name on it. The first game played at New Athletic Field was a 54-0 drubbing of the Marion Military Institute of Alabama. Mississippi State also played some of its home games in a Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium from 1953 until 1990 in Jackson, Mississippi, about 2 hours from Starksville. The stadium also hosted the Egg Bowl between Ole Miss and Mississippi State from 1973 until 1990. If you ever go to a game at Davis Wade Stadium, you will hear a very loud sound throughout the game, and that is a cowbell.
I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell.
The most popular legend is that during a home football game between state and arch-rival Ole Miss, a Jersey cow wandered onto the playing field. Mississippi State beat the Rebels, and the students saw that as a good sign, so they started taking cows to the games. And then once the school stopped that, they started bringing in cowbells. Now, as the 1940s went along, when Mississippi State was in its golden era for its football team, the cowbell slowly became a familiar sound in Davis Wade Stadium. Legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant described playing in this stadium as playing inside a drum. Tiger Stadium is home to the LSU Tigers, built in 1924. This stadium started with one name and has kept that name for nearly 99 years. First game held in the stadium was against their crosstown rival at the time, Tulane, in a game that they called the Battle for the Rag. It was the final game of the season and the Tigers lost 10-0. Tiger Stadium at night is one of the most intimidating places to play in the entire SEC. It could be that their mascot is a live tiger named Mike, but it's actually the noise. It got so loud in Tiger Stadium in 1988 that it registered activity on a seismograph located in a building 1,000 feet from the stadium. You heard that right. The noise from the stadium caused an earthquake, and because of that, it's called the earthquake game. In 1915, the field that would become Hemingway Stadium began when Ole Miss students built the grandstands that held up to 500 people. The first game there was played on October the 1st, and Ole Miss played a school known as the 1st District. They lost that game 10-0. The 1st District is now Arkansas State. It wouldn't resemble a stadium until 1939. Plans were announced in 1920, and engineering students from the university designed the concrete structure that would bear the name Hemingway Stadium. It was named after Judge William Hemingway. Judge Hemingway was a law professor and chairman of the university's Committee on Athletics, and he played a vital role later in bringing Ole Miss to the SEC. They added the name Vaught to the stadium in 1982 after legendary coach Johnny Vaught. As a coach, he won 190 games. At Ole Miss, he won 3 national titles and 6 SEC championships from 1947 until 1970. The field inside the stadium is named after longtime Ole Miss supporter Dr. Jerry Hollingsworth, making the name officially Vaught Hemingway Stadium at Hollingsworth Field. Now, if you go to a game at Vaught Hemingway, you're going to hear a familiar chant. It's called Hotty Toddy. The origins of the chant aren't very clear. Some people speculate that it was developed after the Virginia Tech regimental band called the Highty Tighties derived the cheer used throughout World War II. The first documented evidence of the chant appeared in the November 19, 1926 copy of the Mississippian, and it was originally spelled Highty Tighty. It evolved into Hotty Toddy after a warm whiskey drink made with whiskey, honey, lemon, and hot water. Kyle Field has existed in some form of fashion since 1904. The field was named after Edwin Jackson Kyle, or E.J. Kyle as it's written. He was a professor of horticulture and assigned a large field for his crops. Not needing that much land, he used barbed wire to create the field. He also put $605 of his own money down to put up the grandstands. It was an unofficial name given by the Corps of Cadets, but a few years later it stuck, and it's been the official name for nearly 120 years. Now, there are a few features of Kyle Field that make it stand out, the obvious being the 12th man TV, which is a 4,000 square foot LED video board in the south end zone. Also, it is a final resting place for former mascots, a collie named Reveille. The graves were temporarily relocated when they built the Ben Richardson Zone, and then they found their way back into Now, the most notable tradition that happens in this stadium doesn't happen during the game, it happens the night before. It's called the Midnight Yell. The origins of the Midnight Yell date back to 1931. Now, yell practice had become a regular after-dinner ritual in 1913, but the first Midnight Yell wasn't held until 1931. It began when a group of cadets were gathered at Peanut Owen's dorm room in Puryear Hall. Someone suggested that all the freshmen should meet on the steps of the YMCA building at midnight to practice their yells. The freshmen asked 2 senior yell leaders at the time to attend. They said they couldn't authorize the event, but they just might happen to show up. Word quickly spread, and that was the beginning of the Midnight Yell. That's it for this video of history in 1/2 hour or less. Please like and subscribe, support the channel. If you have any ideas, leave them in the comment below. We will be looking at the SEC East stadiums next. Have a good one.